In this week's episode, we're going to be discussing late season hunting tips.
Mossy Oak Properties, where outdoorsmen find their favorite place.
Well, we are in the month of December. Now, in the whitetails world, there's two things that run a whitetail deer. During certain times of the year, it's on the little sexual side.
Right.
The other time, and majority of the time, is food.
That's
is
right.
it not?
Food and cover. Those two things really dictate 95% of a deer's decisions. Like you mentioned, outside of the rut, they are looking to put food in their bellies and find cover in which to keep them safe.
And that's when it comes to the late season hunting tips, which we're kind of getting into, depending on where you're at, obviously. In the Midwest, you're starting to get some cold,
Right.
You're starting to get some weather. New England states, upper Midwest, majority of the country, other than the southern brothers and sisters. Yeah, it's, you got to start thinking food.
Yeah, this time of year, food is king in the whitetail woods.
Mm-hmm.
It's coming off of the rut for bucks and does, but bucks especially are tired. They have been chasing tail, figuratively speaking, for the last month or so. They're tired. They have lost up to 25% of their body weight chasing and looking for does, and they're looking to replenish those calories, put weight back on, and they're going into the most stressful period of time for a whitetail deer, buck and doe, going into winter. So right now, they are focused on food, and food.
Yeah, so we talked about late season hunting tips, and as you see, there's a pattern. It's food. Yeah, but what types of food?
Right.
We're looking at carb. High carb, high fat type stuff. As Cody mentioned, coming off if you're practicing quality deer management, those whitetail bucks and does are coming off pretty intense rut.
Yeah.
So they've lost a lot of weight, as Cody mentioned. So what puts weight back on? High carb, high fat. So obviously, in the Midwest, what's the Midwest known for? Corn
and beans.
Corn and beans. So hunting over food plots of that matter, your brassicas and turnips do fit that mold as well.
Sure.
But don't forget the one thing that most hunters just forget about is acorns still.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, your white oaks obviously hit the ground, get some moisture, they start tailing.
Yeah.
Start kind of growing. Your red oak family, black oak family, whatever one, there's like a debate on that. But anyway, your red oaks, because they're so acidic in the beginning,
right.
There's so much
tannins.
Tannin, excuse me. Yeah, so it's for a reason.
Yeah.
This late season type stuff, so you can still have great success on that.
Right. Yeah. You mentioned corn and beans, and in the Midwest or in agriculture, that's going to be your ticket. If you got standing beans or standing corn during the winter, during the late season, you're certainly going to find deer there. But as is the case for whitetails across all of their natural range, 70% of their diet is made up of natural browse, native vegetation. Acorns fall into the natural browse, hard mast category. And as you mentioned, those white oaks early season, they're going to be scooped up by deer. They are more preferred than the red oaks because they are tastier, less acidic. But those red oaks, I know back home, I'm in big timber mountain country. I'll shift a lot of my hunting focus and trail cameras to red oak flats, scarlet oaks, red oaks. Early season, they are less preferred than white oaks, but come late season, and as you mentioned, it is by design because they are more acidic, they're on the ground longer, but that is for a reason. There is an available food source for deer this time of year, and you get into December, January, I found a lot of sheds. I mean, this is fast forward until March, but I found a lot of shed antlers around red oaks and in red oak flats because those acorns will last until the spring, and it's a high carb, highly nutritious food source for whitetails this time of year. This time of year, they don't really, I'm sure they would prefer a white oak, but if it's an acorn on the ground and it's high fat, high carb, they're going to scoop it up and put it in their belly because it's nutritious for them this time of year.
Yeah, and for those who enjoy hunting late season, I know I do. Pre-rut, late season. As I get older, maybe not so much the late season because my buddy heater goes out. But anyway, but no, it's if you're into late season hunting, create the environment, food plot wise, that will last late season. A lot of clients, I try to tell them, that they run out of food sources. Double fence a cornfield in. Double fence, a soybean or sorghum field. So that way, you can take it down whenever you want. You can have them feeding on it whenever you want. And double fencing, it's just putting a fence, and it is another, a strand, 2 strands far apart. It's the depth, it's electricity, it's etc. that keep those deer out of your food sources, and you allow them to feed when you want. So if you have a cornfield or standing beans in January in Ohio, that's what you do. It's pretty good success. Whether you kill the big one, that's another story. But success on seeing, viewing, and harvesting goes and bucks as well as. But the one thing that Cody and I definitely preach about, and a lot of our videos, is natural forage.
Yeah, you mentioned the hunting side of things, and we've talked about this in past videos. I know for me, I've mentioned it, I like hunting early season and late season almost more than the rut. The rut in November is the most exciting time, but I like hunting deer on a bed to feed pattern in the early season, and that applies in the late season as well. And especially, this is another reason I enjoy hunting the late season, is when you're hunting a food source, let the property and those deer rest in the mornings. Most of your activity is going to be on those food sources, is going to be in the afternoon. So sleep in, it's cold, maybe snowy, sit by the fire, sleep in, your body will appreciate it. And then get into those food sources early in the afternoon, because if it is cold and it's harsh weather, they're going to move earlier in the afternoon than normal. But let the property rest, let the deer rest during the mornings. There's going to be less activity in the mornings anyway. Let the property rest, get in on those food sources early in the afternoon. You're going to hunt unpressured deer, come into a food resource that they're highly desired. But that's just the food plot side of things. And as I mentioned earlier in this video, northwards of 70% of a deer's diet is made up of what God put on green earth himself. Natural, native, forage, browse, and vegetation.
In all our videos, we always talk about native vegetation, and there's a reason for that. And there's nothing better that cost-effective wise, planting a food plot, you have the benefits and cons of that. There's supplement feeding, there's baiting, there's those issues with that. But no one can deny, and no one can argue the fact that natural browse, especially late season, is a win for both the species, food consumption. It produces cover, and it produces cover and food for just more than white-tailed deer. Once it starts doing its thing. The pounds of food per acre, any more research comes out. It used to be 1,500, it used to be 1,200, now it's 1,500, and it goes on. How many pounds of food per acre is insane? A well-managed forest, a woods, a woodland area, your environment. So chainsaw management, the work that you do here next month, January and February, is going to dictate this coming December, January, February, health of the white-tailed deer, health of many wildlife species on top of that, that food consumption. That is what I know last year in 2022, I think we had a very cold snap. People were freaking out, but Ohio, I know in my state, there was 12, 15 inches of snow. It was, close to high of 20, high of 10, and people were like, they're all going to die. No, not at all. They are made to, go through that, and native vegetation and hunting those areas.
Absolutely. To kind of go back to food sources, back home on my property, December, my food plots are pretty well smoked. Unless deer like to eat dirt and rocks, they don't spend a lot of time.
We don't know that.
In those food plots. But I've got wildlife openings, I got clear cuts where there are tons, literal tons of food in those clear cuts, and that's where I see the majority of my deer. Late season, and where I focus a lot of my hunting, is on those south-facing slopes. That's something else to consider. Because it is cold, south-facing slopes are going to get that thermal regulation. That sun is going to help them conserve calories. They're going to warm themselves up quicker in the mornings. But those clear cuts, a lot of food and a lot of cover. As you've always said, cover that equals food. A lot of that broom sedge, briars, rubus species, that helps cut the wind, helps them conserve calories in that regard. So again, native vegetation, as we have always preached, cover that equals food, is never more evident or more valuable to all wildlife than this time of year, late season and then winter.
Yeah, and a chainsaw is a very good hunting implement. Let me explain. Especially in Ohio or a lot of states where hunting season, deer season goes into past January. Ours runs into February. So a chainsaw going out there, especially if you have any softwood, your maples, your poplars, your aspen, going out there for like a full, half a week to a week before you're gonna go hunt. Go do some cutting, put your stand up, and I'm telling you, that chainsaw is a heck of a hunting implement, what it just did for you and wildlife, and then the hunting access to it.
I got a pretty cool story. I haven't even told you this. So I was in the deer stand last week. It was before dark. I was sitting there before the sun comes up. I hear creak, 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 snap, snap, snap. Actually, a pretty significant sized tree falls over like 30 yards from my stand. Kind of scared me a little bit. Anyway, fast forward, sun comes up. I peek behind me once the sun comes up, and I look. It was an old dead locust that had fallen over, but it was covered in grapevines. And now a couple hours later, 2 does and 2 fawns came and cleaned all the grapes off the grapevines that had fallen. They left, and then an hour later they came back. So you may not even have to wait a half a week. That morning, that tree fell over. A couple hours later, there were deer cleaning up the buds off, the grapes off the grapevine.
That soft part of the.
Absolutely, instant food source, and you don't have to wait for a tree to fall over in the woods. You can accomplish it with a chainsaw, just like.
That sounds like an inside job. Someone just got the tree wrong. But no, late season hunting it can be successful, especially if you can handle the little bit of the elements. But anymore with clothing, Mossy clothing and all that stuff. Everybody makes really good stuff. Plus a buddy here.
There you go.
Yeah, depends on where you're hunting. But no, it's late season. Don't poo-poo it.
Oh yeah, I mean it's cold out. That's why we're inside today, is because it's 20 degrees outside.
It's cold.
But there's value in that. You kind of embrace the uncomfortable side of it, and wildlife, they're made for these type of conditions, but we can capitalize on their biology. They're craving food sources, they're craving the sun, they're trying to conserve calories. Find those food sources depending on where you're at in the country: corn, beans, food plots, natural vegetation. Find cover where they can get out of the cold, get out of the wind. Late season hunting, it's not ideal. It's not as glamorous or as sexy as the rut. It's not as warm or as comfortable as the early season. But if you do your due diligence, put in the time, and focus on the work that you've done in previous winter and all of your wildlife and habitat management work, you can enjoy late season hunting success.
Mossy Oak Properties, where outdoorsmen find their favorite place.